I wasn't sure when the excavator might make it back to the ant village and back to my plot, so while I had it there, I decided I'd better do a lot of the digging and earthworks that I have planned. In the northwest corner of my property is a draw, which is actually the site of an old creek bed that no longer flows. I decided to dig a trench and see if I might find some water, or just to see what the layers are underneath the soil. What I found was about a foot of topsoil, about 3 to 4 feet of sandy subsoil, and then a thick clay layer. In between that clay layer and another clay layer, you can see the old creek bed, rounded stones and sand. The majority of the earthworks I had to do was digging out of a large terrace which will serve many functions. For one, it will collect the water coming in off of this water bar and allow it to soak into the soil. It will also be the site of one of my houses, as well as the start of my permaculture bike park. I quickly ran into a very rocky area, so I got my neighbor Evan to help me pick out some large rocks which we can use in our building projects later. In exchange for his help, we split up all the rocks that we gathered. Before I came to Wheaton Laboratories, I'd never operated any kind of excavator. And to be honest, it's kind of like the fulfilling of a boyhood dream. Probably the dream of many boy who has played in a sandbox. The rent on an ant village plot includes 16 hours of use of Paul's old and very beat up excavator, which we have christened Rex, or Toothless, for very obvious reasons. It was pretty intimidating to operate at first, as everything shakes around and rattles and moves a whole lot, and any wrong move can lead to some pretty violent shaking inside the cab. But once I got the hang of it, it turned out to be a lot of fun. I quickly realized that I had far too much dirt uphill to make my terrace at the level I wanted to, so my solution was just to build some bike jumps out of it. It was about this time that I realized I was fulfilling another boyhood dream. For most of my life, I've spent countless hours with a shovel and wheelbarrows, building jumps with my friends, and dreaming about building them with a big excavator. And here I was, piling up a huge landing that would have taken a week for me and my friends to build with shovels. I started having a lot more fun operating the excavator, and about this time, my imagination started running wild with all the different jumps and lines I could create with this thing. I had already pretty much created the terrace I needed. Here I am checking the level of it with a sight level. But I still had a whole lot of dirt uphill. So, again, the solution was just to build bigger jumps. The pile I'm working on here will be landing for a very large hip jump, which will angle off to the right and lead toward the north end of my property. From years of experience, some good, some bad, I've learned that large jumps are a lot safer when you have a very big landing area, so it was really good to be able to pile this landing as tall as I wanted. Back here, I'm piling up a landing for another line that will go through the more wooded part on the southern end of my property. Both of these lines will split off into many more other lines, like the branches of a tree. That way, a rider has many different options to choose from every time he drops into the bike park. All of these different lines will likely come back together into one large feature down at the bottom of the property in the draw. This is how my friends and I built our last set of jumps down in Orange County, which is ironically called the Sandbox. I found it's a really fun way to put together a bike park. Once I got the bottom of the terrace dug out, along with those jumps, I started moving towards the top of the terrace, where I had a lot more dirt to remove in order to get it down to the right level. My solution again was to pile up a very large landing. This landing will serve as a drop-in to get speed for all the rest of the jumps in the park. I still had more dirt to deal with, so I started building some smaller jumps, which will give people a less intimidating option to start off with. The next day, I was able to move up to the top of the terrace, next to the road, and start digging out a hole for one of the underground houses I plan to build. This house will be built right up to the road, but it will be covered with earth and blend right into that Hugelkultur behind the excavator, so it shouldn't even be visible from the road. Not only will this house be a place for visiting riders to stay, cook meals, and hang out when they're not riding, but it will also serve as an elevated starting point to give riders speed to do all the jumps. As I said, the pile on the left will serve as a very large landing. The riders will drop off the roof of the house and have plenty of consistent speed for the rest of the jumps in the park. How's that for stacking functions? Obviously, I'm really looking forward to building this house, as well as the rest of the permaculture bike park. I'm incredibly grateful to have this chance to combine my passions for permaculture and bicycling in such a big way. Of course, it's not all about building bike jumps. I also want to grow some food. I gathered a large amount of woody material next to the road and used the soil from my shop site to build a very large Hugelkultur bed. This Hugelkultur bed will not only grow food and build soil, but it will also serve as a visual and sound barrier for the road. Once the mound is covered in bushes and other greens, it should serve as a filter to keep dust from the road out of the property. I'll also put a fence along the bottom of the berm, which will help keep the deer out. Having this large pile of soil at hand, along with the excavator, made quick work out of building this very tall Hugelkultur berm. I'll plant the berm out with a mixture of cover crop seeds and nitrogen fixers to help start building up the soil. Their extensive root systems will start building up the soil structure, as well as helping to hold the pile together. And once all the wood inside of it starts to rot, it'll soak up any rainwater that comes along and hold on to it until the plants need it in the drier times. A Hugelkultur is one technique that can be used to grow food without irrigation. Speaking of water, at the northeast corner of my property, there's a low spot in the road which collects a very large puddle during heavy rains. I use the excavator to extend this low spot into my property. This extension will serve as a road, giving me access to the back corner of my property, while also bringing water collected on the main road into my property to be used in my growing beds. The soil I excavated from this, I used to build another berm along the border between me and my neighbor Chris. So, instead of a fence between neighbors, we'll have a garden. There are a lot more earthworks I plan to do on my property, but for now, this is a good start and will give me lots to think about into the future.